Hello, this is Mayor Ras J, Baraka, and thank you for tuning in to EduTalk, where we will discuss incredible topics centered around our young people, about local control, community schools, our special needs population, creating curriculum and opportunities for young people to move forward from elementary school into careers or to universities. It is the opportunity for us to discuss our young people's creativity, their imagination, their ability to move our city forward. We need them in Newark, and we need the best educated, the most well-trained, incredibly courageous and imaginative young people coming out of our school system. And this show gives us an opportunity to engage those topics. Again, thank you for watching. God bless.
Welcome to EduTalk. I'm Toni Richardson, Chief Education Officer for Mayor Baraka's Office of Comprehensive Community Education. On EduTalk, we talk about everything education, from preschool all the way through college and adult education. So we're glad that you've joined us today. Today we have some very interesting guests with us. We're going to be talking today about chronic absenteeism. And, you know, as we know, in the business of education, we have come to a common sense conclusion, those of us who work in education, and that's that the days that students miss from school seriously impact their academic achievement, not just test scores, but the sequence of skills and knowledge are interrupted with each day missed. Common sense, right? But there are so many reasons why students don't come to school every day, and the numbers are staggering. The 2017 Newark Kids Count report shows that 59% of 12th graders in Newark were chronically absent in 2015-16 school year, with a low of 20% in grades 3, 4, and 5, which we know is still not good. So, because that means that 1 in 5 children are chronically absent. So in addition to looking at some of the data, today we're going to talk about how missing school really impacts children, and particularly in preschool, as well as how a district similar to Newark has made some inroads in improving student attendance. So we have a long way to go in Newark. We're doing better, but it's also really important that we learn from people who are tackling this same problem. So today I have 2 guests with me, very important guests in the world of education, and who also have some real serious information and thoughts on how chronic absenteeism really affects the children in our city. And so our first guest is Peter Chen, and Peter is the Policy Counsel for AC in New Jersey. That's the Advocates for Children in New Jersey. And Nana, I hope I'm saying it right. Nana, I'm going to get it right. Okay. Nana Ofasu Ama. Did I come close at least? Thank you. I've been trying so hard. And Nana is the Executive Director, Office of Early Childhood Education for the Newark Public Schools District. So what exactly is chronic absenteeism? Like, what does it look like, Peter, in the life of a student? What does chronic absenteeism look like?
So the technical definition of chronic absenteeism is once a student misses a certain percentage of their school days. At ACNJ we use about the 10% figure as the rough estimate. But how that looks in the life of the student is going to be very different depending on what that student is living through. So for example, a student who's missing a lot of school due to chronic illness is going to have an experience that's very different from a student who's missing a lot of school because they have a part-time job and those hours keep them out of school. But the impact on the student is going to be very, very similar regardless of reason. So regardless of whether an absence is excused or unexcused, if they're sick, if they're suspended, if that student is out of school for too many days, those absences add up. That's going to impact the child's learning, that's going to impact a child's social emotional development, and that's going to impact their long-term success.
Absolutely. So according to the ACNJ report, 2015-2016, the 12th grade chronic absenteeism reached 59%. The high school graduation that same year was 73%, compared to 93% state average. So there appears to be an obvious correlation, at least to me, between that absenteeism in the 12th grade and the graduation rate. Can you elaborate? Am I making sense here?
Yeah,
Is there
absolutely.
anything different that you would say?
So it's definitely clear that students who are missing too much school in high school are less likely to graduate from high school. And one of the interesting things that we've seen in the national research is that they're less likely to complete their second year of college as well. So each time these chronically absent students are affected, they're going to have consequences later on in their school career. And one of the things that we see in the Newark data is that how a student's attendance looks in 9th grade is a strong predictor of how their graduation rate looks. So students who have good attendance in 9th grade have a 90% graduation rate, whereas students who have severely chronically absent attendance in 9th grade have a 25% graduation rate. So there's a big difference. It doesn't mean that students who are chronically absent are destined to not graduate from high school, but it does mean that it's a strong indicator that this is a student who's off track.
Thank you. I think what you're saying is very important, I know, for the Newark District and the Mayor's office. We work with the district a lot, particularly with the Community Schools Initiative, and I'm sure in other schools in the district also, where we try to identify the reasons why students are absent and try to help families to solve those problems so that we can give students, or the students can have a much better chance of success, of overcoming some of those hurdles so they can come to school more and be successful. So Nana, your focus is early childhood.
Yes.
So I know, we've talked about this a lot, but I think it's really important that we hear, why is attendance in early childhood so important? I mean, I remember, and I'm a grandmother now, but when my children went to school, they they played in preschool, and I didn't particularly think about how that related to their education, later on. And I think parents nowadays are probably more enlightened about that than in my day. But what can you tell us about why it matters to come to preschool?
So I think to start, just kind of echoing the data that has been shared in the high school level, the other part of the spectrum in terms of chronic absenteeism that's pretty high is around pre-K. So last year and over the last couple of years, we've noticed that about 40% of our preschoolers are actually chronically absent. So they're missing a lot of days of school. And I think that the critical piece for pre-K is that we know, and all the research shows that pre-K is a strong predictor of what's to come, even graduation rates down in high school. So it's critical, number one, for our children to be there every day. And not to, so I think what we think about, as you just said, children are just playing in pre-K and they can catch up the next day, or I miss a day here and there, or the child may not be feeling well, and that's what a lot of parents have shared with us. So we've done a lot of work to try to understand the reasons around chronic absenteeism. And what parents have told us around preschool is health issues. And we had thought it was chronic health issues like asthma, but it actually ended up being sort of the colds and the sniffle, and the child may have a stomach ache or something less chronic. And so the question is, how are we supporting parents to know when to bring a child to school and when you can keep them at home, right? And we know that's just one example of what some of the reasons are. We've done some focus groups this summer trying to uncover this, because we can't solve this without our families being part of this. And preschool is a place where families get supported. So a couple of things. So number one, when a child misses preschool, here's what happens, right? Let's think about who our preschoolers are. They're 3 and 4-year-olds. They're 36 months and 48 months. They're still our babies. And at this age, from birth to age 5, the brain is developing so rapidly, and we want to catch all the opportunities we can for our children to be exposed to so much that it actually does help the neurons connect in the brain. So that's one thing.
So there's a science
There's
to
a
this.
sines to it. And the more exposure you have for children to a myriad of things, not just sitting and reading and writing all the time, but actually movement also helps the neurons connect in the brain. So we want to make sure our children, so you walk into a pre-K classroom and you'll see, number one, a question of the day. So last year we inputted a full-blown curriculum for pre-K, very science-based. So our children are learning some amazing vocabulary words around trees and simple machines and all these other sort of studies, and they're doing inquiry work on what's a tree, how does it grow? They're learning photosynthesis at this age. And you'd be shocked to hear the vocabulary that they're learning in school every day. So you walk into our classroom, and what you'll see is, for example, right now we're going into a tree study with our 3-year-olds are doing the tree study. You walk in, they start to talk about, what the arborist does, what's happening in the classroom, what's happening with the tree. Here's a kind of tree. Here's this type of tree that loses its leaves, and what is it called? They're using all the vocabulary. And what happens in our curriculum that we have is it builds on each other every day. So every day is a build on the day before. So if a child misses a day, they kind of miss the opportunity to learn with their peers as well. Another side of pre-K is every child is in a small group every day. A teacher groups children by how they're doing, how they're advancing, where they need support. And so if you miss that time with your smaller group of peers with just your teacher and getting that personal attention, you're missing that learning as well. So it's critical for families to make sure children in pre-K come to school every day. And we know that children at this age, again, they're babies, they learn through play. That's just how they naturally learn. And it's not only about math and literacy, but it's also about social emotional development. How do they self-regulate? So when they go to kindergarten or first grade, they can sit down and study, right? And write and listen to the teacher. It's all those things. And children at this age need to continue to be exposed to these experiences, to continue to build their skills and knowledge so they can be ready for kindergarten. So it's critical that our children are there every day.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Before we go on, I'm going to throw in a fun fact. Fun fact is something that we do on every EduTalk show, and we're going to come back. I'm going to throw the question out, and then at the end I'm going to come back with the answer, and just let's see how many people who are out there listening and watching know the answer to this. So how many absences do you think that it takes? What is the number of absences that you think it takes for a student to be considered chronically absent in any school year? How many absences have to accrue before a student falls into that chronically absent category? We'll come back with the answer before the end of the show. So, this is all very daunting to me, and I will tell you, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking back. So, one of my children used to get a tummy ache, and guess what? Sometimes she stayed home because she had a tummy ache. Right. And thinking back, I'm like,
is it nerves?
Did she really have to stay home those days? So I think it's really food for thought. Of course, you don't want your child to go to school, when they're contagious or when they really are ill and non-functional. But sometimes your tummy may hurt in the morning, and as you get going, you're really okay. And so I think this understanding the value of going to school every day is very helpful. So wish somebody had explained that to me, some years ago. So this is a daunting situation for Newark as we move to advance academic achievement, as we move into local control where our school board will be responsible for these things. So as I mentioned earlier in the opening, there are, I believe, some places kind of maybe similar demographics to us or not, but some places who are actually making some advances in improving student attendance. So I'd like to hear about that. Peter, I think that you can talk about that.
Sure thing.
Yeah.
One thing I'd want to mention, though, is that there's no silver bullet for attendance.
That's right.
Every absence is going to be different, and every population is going to have different absence patterns that are going to require different interventions. So I think we want to be cognizant of how tailored these interventions are going to have to be in order for them to be successful. We do know that schools and school districts do have a big role to play. So one example that we use that has great success is a middle school called Hedgepeth Williams Middle School in Trenton. And they have a very high low-income population, and they were dealing with very high absenteeism. And I think they went through a process of looking at their data, but getting beyond just the numbers themselves and really getting into what are the stories, what is the reality going on behind the numbers. And what they found was how important their school climate was to what signals they were sending to families about whether or not students felt welcome in the school or not. And so they started doing, for example, home visits over the summer, before the school year started, looking at those students who were chronically absent the year before and saying, let's go see how they're doing. Let's go find out what their lives are like. And what they saw was that these are students who need love and support, and that they were not necessarily thinking about attendance in that way until they started talking to families. And so I think the key is to develop the interventions, and now they have an attendance team. They're regularly looking at attendance. All of the staff, from the custodian to the security guard to the teacher to the counselor, everyone's on board. Everyone's asking, and the culture has really shifted away from a compliance-based model where you're asking, hey, why didn't you come to school yesterday? Or sending a letter home to mom and dad saying, Junior was absent X number of days, and if they're absent 5 more days, we have to take them to court, which is a very confrontational sort of approach, and instead shifting to a more conversational, non-confrontational, supportive approach. Asking instead, I noticed you were missing yesterday, is everything okay? And even having these little postcards that they send home, like you get from the dentist that say, it's time for your next appointment. They sent home these little postcards that said, we miss you, and they were addressed to the student, not to the parent. And this kind of approach can start to shift the conversation. What's really needed is a culture change. It's not a question of, can we bring in one initiative or another program and those students will start showing up. It's about relationship building. And that's what, if you go talk to the principal, Adrian Hill at Hedgepeth Williams, or if you go talk to Sandra Diodene, who's now an administrator in Patterson, but she was principal at School 5 that also had a lot of success on attendance, they'll say it's about relationships. It's about talking to families, building a trusting relationship with students and with families, and being able to have those lines of communication open so that when a child is sick and mom calls and says, I'm worried, I don't know if I can bring, Junior in, they can have a conversation about when is it okay to bring Junior back to school. Those kinds of conversations are the key to really addressing the attendance issue from the school angle. And there are community components as well, for sure, but schools have a large role to play in that way.
Thank you, and I think that that approach, it sounds like the community schools approach that we're building here in Newark, and the way that we communicate with parents, I think obviously it makes a big difference. So, Nana, can you speak kind of to bounce off of what Peter was saying? What does that look like in preschool in Newark? What kind of approaches are we using?
Yeah, so I think I'm definitely in agreement with the strategy, definitely, of having a welcoming environment for school. So part of this issue is engaging our families, and we can't do that if we're being punitive, right? We can't do that if we're saying, well, you're missed a day. We need to really have a welcoming environment so our families actually feel comfortable to share what's happening with our little ones. So a few things. So number one, this year, what we're doing is making sure our nurses are in the forefront of this as well. So we do have a group of nurses that are in our district schools and also in our community-based provider preschools. So this goal, we're changing our registration process. We call it the parent education and registration process. So as our parents come in, they get to meet with their nurse in their school, and they get to talk, because we've heard from our pre-K parents, and we know 3 and 4-year-olds get sick a lot. They're just building their immune system. Right. So it's a time where we can start to talk to families about, when should you keep your child at home? What resources do you have? If they have a doctor's appointment, what other options do you have? Can you do a Saturday? Can you do it after hours? So there's some pieces where our health professionals become really critical to this equation, but a critical piece is, again, building those relationships with our families, really understanding what their concerns are. And I think that what you'll notice about the pre-K program we have here in Newark, we have family workers and provider sites, our district Head Start programs, also have family advocates that work with families day in, day out. And their whole goal is to, family, what's your goal? How can we support you? What do you need? How do we make this better for you? And one of our beliefs in the Office of Early Childhood is, when our families do better, our children do better. So if we take care of mom and dad, little Junior will come to school, right? And that's what we hope.
What kind of things do you hear from parents, for example?
So a few things, and I think you kind of echoed some of that as well. They're just playing, right? They're not getting homework. So it can't be that important because they're really just playing with their friends, and they come home and they talk about missing being with their friends, right? And it's just a playtime for them. But what's happening with our children is they're building the vocabulary. They're learning how, when the little boy in a school that I went to recently built a little house and started to learn to try to write, "This is my log house." He wasn't writing all the words correctly, spelling it correctly, but he was trying, right? Just sounding out the letters. So those are the kind of experiences we want to expose them. But it's letting families know that this is also important and that we have standards in pre-K that link to what's happening K-12. And if we miss the stage, we're missing getting them ready for K-12 as well.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Thank you so
It's a
much.
lot to be done.
So I'm going to stop now, and I'm going to give that answer to our fun fact, or I'll let you give the answer. How many days would a student have to be absent, accumulated absences, before they are considered to be chronically absent? What's the answer?
So it's about 2 a month, or 18 over a 180-day school year.
18 days. Wow. It sounds like a lot when you say 18, but if you look at it as maybe a day here and a day there, you can very easily accumulate at least 18 days, you know. Yeah.
And families routinely, and students routinely underestimate the number of days that they've missed. So you ask a student or a parent at the end of the year, so how many days did your student miss? Well, they could, well, maybe like 5 or 10, but then you can show the numbers, and people routinely underestimate. So it's always trickier to think about.
I was that parent.
Oh yeah.
I was that. I admit it. I was that
right?
parent.
Like,
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of my children, actually, who is an adult now, and she was looking through some old report cards. I had given her like a bag of her old stuff, and she's like, "Ma, why was I out this many days?" I'm like, "I don't know." And I actually had not ever thought about it that way. So. Again, this is a really, really, really important, really insightful information. So, in closing, what do you say to parents and students and teachers and administrators about the joint responsibility for every student to come to school every day? Because I do look at it as a joint responsibility. There's no one entity that is responsible for this, some more than others. But what would a message to everyone be on this? Peter, and then Anna?
So I think my message would be that every day missed adds up. Every absence adds up. And we all have a responsibility to make sure that all students receive a high quality education, and that cannot happen if students are missing that many days of school. And each one of those absences becomes a hole in the child's long-term education, and that's the message is, regardless of reason. I think there's been a lot of focus on excused or unexcused absences. Oh, this absence is okay because it was a planned absence. We were on vacation, we were visiting grandma. The reality is that absence is going to affect that child's education, and the more there are, the more impact it's going to have down the road.
Right. So I'd like to add that, we miss a day, miss a lot, even in pre-K. And what I would like to say to our schools and community-based provider leadership is, let's keep an open, welcoming door for families, and let's listen to our families. And to families, please let us know how we're doing and how we're doing with listening to you and supporting you. And that's what pre-K is all about. This is a time where we can support our families now. And let's listen and let's do it together.
I just echo that in the older grades as well.
Yes.
I think that one of the things that we've seen in the data is there's a big jump between 8th and 9th grade and then 9th and 10th grade. And at least part of that, based on our focus groups with students and parents and teachers, is that the high school environment sort of loses a little bit of the nurturing environment of that K-8 space that the teacher is providing the education, they're providing subject matter expertise, and it's the student's job to show up and learn. And what we see in reality is these are students who oftentimes need a lot of supports. And the engaging the family, having that welcoming environment, these are things that pre-K does really well, but these are also things that we need throughout the K-12 system too.
Absolutely. I think as we teach students to be responsible, there's also a high level of care and support that has to go along with this. Not just, you're in high school now, and you're responsible. A lot of care and support on that all the way through. So thank you very much, and thank everyone for joining us for EduTalk. I hope that this has been an informative session. It has for me. I have certainly admitted some things on this show that because I've had some revelations as I listened to you and, reflecting on, my parenting and, gee, I could have done some things better. And we all certainly, as parents and teachers and students, we all can. So I hope that this has been enlightening, and please remember, 18 days. We do not want to get to anything near 18 days. We want to be 100%. 100% is actually the number. So thank you for joining EduTalk. EduTalk, it comes to you from the Mayor Ras Baraka's Office of Comprehensive Community Education, and we'll be back with more topics. Thank you.